All right, everybody, what's going on? What's going on? Taptio Treviso, thanks for the 5. Would you prefer Blackbeard to get Emu's fruit, or get a dark Nika-esque fruit from Loki? Have Blackbeard have Awaken Conqueror's Haki, or X other power up to Pirate King tier, to Pirate King plus tier? That's a great question. Like, which power up Blackbeard needs to Pirate King plus tier? Blackbeard needs a lot at this point. I think he needs a lot. Because it's like, the level that we just saw with the whole God Valley situation, it's pretty unprecedented. And, like, put it this way, if Blackbeard was at God Valley, I think he would just, like, as he is right now, I think he gets taken care of pretty much as easily as, like, Kaido and Big Mom did at God Valley. Like, I put him closer to, like, wherever Big Mom was at God Valley, maybe that's where Blackbeard is right now. You know? That's how I kind of feel. I mean, Big Mom at least had Advanced Conqueror's Haki along with her Broken Fruits. And Blackbeard, I don't think Blackbeard has that. I think Oda like, Oda does not draw Blackbeard using Advanced Conqueror's Haki. Let's get the stream likes up to 50 real quick. Yeah, I think that... oh, by the way, before I finish my thoughts on this question, for this stream, I'm thinking what I kind of want to do is actually, it's a little bit different. Now I'm thinking I want to do it, so not as a tier list, I want to do it as a tournament bracket, and I'm thinking I want to do all non-Straw Hat fights. Does that sound more interesting? I think that could be more fun, because I want to ride off the God Valley stuff that's happening right now. I want to, like, that's the fun thing to discuss. So I think I kind of want to do that. I want to do all non-Straw Hat fights in the story. So things that we've seen bits and pieces of, you know? Like, things like Law versus Blackbeard, Garp Hachinosu raid, those sort of things. I think that could be fun. And I think it has to be like a little... Marco Saint says, how many non-Strat fights are even there, though? Yeah, I think we could get to a solid bracket amount, like 16, and then we can make them square off, basically. I feel like that's more fun. Law versus Smoker is good to Stormy. Yeah, Law versus Smoker is... Tom says I could have made a tier list for this. I'm thinking we don't do a tier list. But I appreciate the offer, as always, man. I think Law versus Smoker is actually low-key... like one of my favorite fights in the story, because it's one of the only times that Oda really just allowed two characters with interesting devil fruits. Like, like, you could argue Smokers isn't... Laws is very interesting. Laws is a fantastic fruit with a lot of different abilities, right? Smoker's fruit isn't the most interesting, but you combine it all together. He's got more than just a standard, like, fighting style, you know? We got to see how he kind of used Haki and stuff like that in his post-time skip debut. Tom says, does Wiper versus NL count? Ace versus Blackbeard is kind of like the cream of the crop up there for sure. Does Wiper versus NL count? I think we need a minimum length for these, because... otherwise, then we get to too nitty-gritty stuff like Wiper versus Shura or something like that. So, for Blackbeard's final power-up, I feel like... so, if he is... so... how do we feel about the Blackbeard having another soul inside of him at this point? Do we think that's possible? Here, let's see. Does Blackbeard have another soul inside him? Yes, no. I lean away from that now. Yeah, when we think about half off-screen fights, there's quite a few. I want to basically do all the fights that we saw at least a good amount of, or some of, you know? So most people are leaning towards no now. So when I say, yeah, Taptio Treviso, what would be... I think if Blackbeard's meant to be, like, close to the final villain, like the second to last villain, then I think some dark Nika fruit makes sense. If he is the final villain, I think him just taking Emu's fruit makes sense, personally. Elijah Petty, thanks for the 2. Luffy versus Damala Black, best fight ever. Facts. I'm thinking I want to do non-Straw Hat fights, but I don't even know how to explain it. I kind of want to do fights that are like yeah, non-Straw Hat fights, but then that's including stuff like Kid-in-Law versus Big Mom. I guess what I'm saying is like then we get into a lot of nitty-gritty, like Cavendish and Bartholomew versus Gladius, right? I think what I'm trying to get at is fights that are entirely separate from the Straw Hats storyline. Does that make sense? Nah, I think that's silly. I think that's a silly discussion. Yeah, non-major fights? I don't know. Avery Hill says, Morge, have you gotten a chance to read Kagurabashi? Chapter 100 just dropped the other day. It's peak. So, no, I actually... Because I think I'm not in a reading mode right now. I think I just... I want to watch anime at the moment. I think it's because, like... I think I've realized that my preferences for my form of entertainment vary based on how busy life is, especially like work-wise, how busy things are. So what I've realized is that like it's a spectrum where when I don't want to feel too heavily like anime is a good, like getting into a new anime series is always a good choice for me when I need stuff that's kind of low stimulation, just pretty colors, animated characters, animated visuals or whatever. It feels easy on the brain, shorter episodes and stuff. I try live action stuff more when I feel like I have more space for mental investment, because live action shows are usually like hour-ish long, 45 minutes or whatever. And there's just, I don't know, it feels more like I might end up binging it or something. I mean, anime, I obviously end up binging it a lot, but it just feels different. Like I can kind of, I don't know, I just feel like less investment when I'm picking up an anime, basically. So anime, live action shows I might be more likely to do, and then video games. If I feel like I got a lot of free time or like a lot of mental space to give, then I'll play video games. And then on the far end of the spectrum is like nature documentaries. I remember when I'm like, I have my least level of like mental capacity to give in my space of like in my free time, then I'll just watch random nature documentaries. That was like a run in the past that I used to do. Now I do that a lot less. Let's get the stream lights up to 50 real quick. All right, we're leaning towards Blackbeard 50-50. Yeah, let's get the stream lights up. Yeah, I want to do... Yeah, Andrew says, Morge, good call, because you already have a video of which you believe are the best fights, and we've already separately ranked Luffy and the Straw Hat's best fights before, lol. I forgot we've ranked Luffy and the Straw Hat's best fights. So I want to do non-Straw Hat fights. Yeah, I want to do non-Straw Hat fights. Yeah, you know what? Let's just do that. So let's just go through, and here, what we're going to begin with is... making our list. All right, making our list. Here's the process. We're gonna make our list, and we're gonna make our we're gonna do our seeding. Okay, and then we're gonna put it all into a bracket. Best fights. All right. Oh, you guys see that screen? Hold on. There we go. Yeah. All right, here we go. All right, best fights. All right. So this is the game. Best fights, non-straw hats. The rules. Obviously, can't include straw hats. Fight can't be too short. Example, Wiper versus Shura. Going to be giving everything, every fight a seeding and putting it in a bracket. Only 16 fights will make the cut. 16 fights, 4 rounds, 16, round of 8, round of 4, round of 2. Yeah, 4 rounds. Disaster Master, thanks for the 5. Are you including vibe fights we didn't see but hear about all the time? No. Definitely not. Let's make that clear. Fight must be at least somewhat on screen. All right, here we go. Let's create our list over here. All right, we'll create a list and then we'll give them seeding. So there'll be what? 4 1 seeds, 4 2 seeds, 4 3 seeds, 4 4 seeds, right? Oh no, that's fucking stupid. We just see. Is that right? Is that how we do it? That makes sense, right? You have the 1 seed versus a 4 seed. Then you have 1 seeds face 4 seeds. Is that right? 1 seeds face the 4 seeds, so we have 4 matchups of that. 2 seeds face the 3 seeds, so we have 4 matchups of that. Okay, then in theory, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, we'll do that. So we'll have 4 1 seeds. Or do you guys just want to do it random? No, we're not going to do seeding. We'll just do randomizer. Will be randomized seeds. No seeding. No seeding. No seeding. So we just need 16. All right, here we go. Mihawk the Goat. Thanks for being a Yonko tier member for 25 months, man. Post Elbaf, Zoro and Luffy will be stronger than most Yonko, but still a tier below Mihawk and Shanks since they are minimum Pirate King level. I don't think Zoro... No, they're not minimum Pirate King to... I disagree with that. I don't think they're minimum Pirate King tier level. Look, I think no matter... So, my view at this point is basically... It is very, very unlikely. I have Mihawk, then Shanks, okay? I imagine they're close to equal, but... I'm going to put Mihawk above Shanks, right? For those 2 characters, I doubt that they are above Prime Whitebeard, okay? Because Prime Whitebeard is basically Pirate King level, same as Prime Rogers, same as Prime Garp, right? Mihawk is never pitched as World's Strongest Man. It's World's Strongest Swordsman, which seems very specific. If Oda wanted to make him the World's Strongest Man, he would have just done that, right? So Mihawk's ceiling is going to be lower than Whitebeard's, no matter what. And then by extension, that extends to Shanks as well, right? So basically, just straight up, they can't be Pirate King level, right? Unless we're missing something. I know people are going to go on and on about Black Blades, but we need to actually find out what Black Blades mean. I think it's a big jump to just basically mean that Black Blades means that you have the best Haki ever. I think that's not established in the story, right? What is established in the story is that Whitebeard was the world's strongest man. Mihawk was the world's strongest swordsman, meaning Whitebeard greater than Mihawk. And unless you have terrible, terrible reading comprehension, you understand from the very first attack of Marineford from Mihawk that Mihawk outright says that he considers Whitebeard above him, right? And he's trying to gauge the distance. Unless you literally think Mihawk is measuring distance with a ruler, which is not what the translations say. So no matter what we know is that Mihawk below Prime Whitebeard, below Whitebeard, whatever, right? Therefore, Mihawk below Roger Garp, right? So I do believe, like I've said on the record many, many times before, for the longest time, I've said forever, Mihawk dices up Kaido, no question. There's like a lot of evidence that Mihawk would beat Kaido. Like, you look at Kaido's performances against all swordsmen, fucking Zoro, Big Mom, Oden, it does not look good for Kaido versus Mihawk. All the evidence, like literally all the evidence in the story pretty much screams that Mihawk beats Kaido. There's not a scrap of evidence that suggests that Kaido would do well at all against Mihawk. Nothing, right? All of his performances against swordsmen that are weaker than Mihawk leave a lot to be desired, right? So I personally always had Mihawk definitely above Kaido. I feel like if Kaido's like towards the top of what you would call a Yonko, then Mihawk's probably the tippy top of Yonko tier. And then after that, then you're hitting Prime Roger, Whitebeard, Garp, right? To me, that makes sense because, like, this is the thing that I never understand with Zoro fans, which is like Zoro fans feel like Mihawk represents Zoro's final level. So they get upset if you don't put Mihawk at, like, Prime Roger, Whitebeard level or whatever. Mihawk is not Zoro's final level. If he was, then Zoro would never become the world's strongest swordsman because he could never beat Mihawk. Zoro, at the end of the story, will be stronger than Mihawk. So if you're really fixated on how strong Zoro will be at the end of the story, Zoro can be as strong as, like, Prime Roger, Rocks, Whitebeard or whatever, regardless of whether or not Mihawk is. Zoro could even be stronger than them. That doesn't determine Mihawk's strength, because Zoro beats Mihawk. End of story, Zoro is stronger than Mihawk. I don't know why people miss that point. They're just like, no, Zoro has to be as strong or stronger than Roger at the end of the story, therefore Mihawk has to be as strong as Roger. No, that doesn't make any sense. That those two things do not follow. Tapio Treviso says, Mihawk is literally the second last Zoro fight at the very least, and I think it'll be Zoro's hardest difficulty fight. That's cool. Zoro would still be stronger than Mihawk, so it doesn't matter. Most people would acknowledge that Mihawk versus Roger would be like a really high difficulty fight for Roger, right? I just don't understand the fear, which is like, if we don't scale, like, we have to scale Mihawk to this because that's Zoro's ceiling. It's like, no, think a little bit bigger. Zoro's ceiling is objectively, canonically above whatever Mihawk's ceiling is. That's the whole point. Otherwise, he can't achieve his dream. Anyway. Tapio Treviso, thanks for the 2. Does 1165 prove Shanks greater than Roger and Haki? Joy Boy comparison? So no matter what, the fact is that Oda had the Giants compare Shanks' Haki to Joy Boy. Especially interesting considering the Giants have met Roger, right? So very interesting. What I'm going to say on that is, for me, the jury is out at the moment. All right? Because that was a thing that was established. But now we can look at it different ways, because I'm very hesitant to say Shanks above Roger and Haki, right? Very hesitant to say that. Like, it's not out of the realm of possibility, but I'm hesitant to say that. Especially because then it just gets very conflicting, because then it's like, okay, well then that would mean that Mihawk being at least as strong as Shanks or whatever would also be above Roger, but we know that doesn't follow because we know Mihawk's ceiling, as far as been suggested, is below Pirate King level, below Whitebeard and stuff. Mihawk never pitched as world's strongest man, right? So basically something out of the many things Oda has pitched us, something doesn't quite line up. I would rather wait to see what that something is. if we were to reconcile what we heard with the Joy Boy Shanks Haki comparison, one interpretation that I've heard that I didn't previously subscribe to, and as you guys know, I vehemently argued against, or I didn't even like acknowledge it. I was just like, no, the comparison is there. The one interpretation that I could subscribe to is like, maybe the Giants couldn't tell at all how strong Joy Boy's Haki was because it lacked hostility. I didn't feel like that was the interpretation. I felt like that's two different, like at the time, I felt like that's two different points that are being made, which is like the strength of the Haki and then the nature of the Haki. I felt like those are two different things. But you could argue that they literally can't gauge the strength at all because it lacks hostility, so they're just asking, how does it compare to Shanks? Because that's their other, I guess, living ceiling, right? Because Roger's dead. That's the interpretation that we could go with at the moment. I think we gotta wait and see some more to get better ideas. John Abbey, welcome to the Yonko. Thank you very much for joining. I really, really, really appreciate it. Check out your new emotes and everything like that. Also, I should shout out, this is the last shout out for real. Last shout out for real. Pirate King Podcast, submissions are still live. I've not yet recorded them. This is it though. You gotta get them in. We got a ton of submissions last month, like a shit ton of submissions last month. I've not even checked the submission count this month. So get yours in now while you can. For those of you who don't know, Pirate King Podcast, for my top tier patrons, I answer every single question from every Pirate King member that is submitted. Top tier patrons / YouTube members, sorry. And it can be about anything, One Piece, other anime, manga, movies, TV, video games, yada yada. And you get access to all previous Pirate King podcasts. Every podcast is an hour and a half-ish in length. So yeah, just get yours in. And John Abbey, I do appreciate the support, of course. Isaac St. Charles, thanks a lot. Glad it's just like Sengoku said, 2v1, not Haki Bloom. I mean, I thought that it would be good for Roger and Garp to fight Rocks in a 2v1, but I did still hope for a Roger Haki Bloom with the Emu situation. So those are two separate things for me. I like Garp a lot at this point. I like Garp a lot. I would not have wanted him to be like cucked during the fight or whatever, right? So I'm happy about that, but I did also feel like there would definitely be some way that I could write that they both get some shine. Like, for example, if Garp was, because I talk about it in detail in the video, like how I talk about, Rocks being Dami reversing and everything like that, how this could all play out, yada yada. A way Oda could have done it if he were to go to this route. He's not going this route, obviously, but if he were to have gone this route, then a way that could have been good would be Garp takes point during the Rocks battle, and so Garp kind of shows that more during the Rocks battle and looks better there. And then afterwards, with Garp maybe somewhat tapped out, then Roger's the one that drives Emu back. That could have been good in my opinion. So I think Oda's always found good ways to make multiple characters shine without impeding on either character. 10K thanks for the 2 says, so you have Marineford Whitebeard over Mihawk? No, because at Marineford, that's where Mihawk was observing that Whitebeard doesn't seem like his usual self, right? That's where he's seeing like, oh, this gap doesn't seem like what I thought it would be. Let me test this out, right? I would not be surprised. Like, I would guess Mihawk is probably above Marineford Whitebeard is always going to be really, really fucking hard to scale because, like, it's very open to... like, there are going to be people who tell you that, like, on one end of the spectrum, there will be people who tell you that not only was Whitebeard no longer Yonko level, he wasn't even Admiral level anymore, and every single Admiral at Marineford was stronger than him, right? I personally disagree with that interpretation, but then you still have people on the other end of the spectrum, which are basically like, no, Whitebeard was still, like... Whitebeard could have taken on the other Yonko and at least gone even or something, even at his level at Marineford. And in his prime, he was just a totally different level than them or whatever, right? So I think we need a little bit more time and clarity to understand just where Marineford Whitebeard is. But the one thing that we know is that A, Mihawk does normally consider Whitebeard above him from his statement, but B, he senses that might not be an accurate estimation at that moment in time, and therefore he's testing the gap, right? I don't think it's a good look that Mihawk's test got blocked by Jozu right away. It's kind of a shitty test. But, I mean, the implication is very clear. Let's get the stream likes up to 100 real quick. Elijah Petty, thanks for the 5. I may be overanalyzing, but at Marineford, when Shanks states, how about it teach, no Blackbeard, he's kind of hitting that Blackbeard is something else. I personally think that's overanalyzing because it's more so that Blackbeard is kind of... As far as I know, Teach is basically the name, like his actual name, right? That Shanks has known him as for years, right? He was always on Blackbeard's or Whitebeard's ship. They've seen him many times, but since he left the ship, now he's been taking on the moniker Blackbeard, right? So it's kind of addressing his rise into something else. Hassan, thanks for being a Yonko tier member for a month. Morge, is Zoro greater than Oden since he doesn't struggle with Enma anymore? Mihawk versus Shanks is the Gogeta versus Vegeta of One Piece. Gogeta wins BTW. The content... I don't even remember Gogeta versus Vegeta. I don't remember the difference between the two. One's obviously the rings, the other's fusion dance or whatever, right? But Oden didn't struggle with Enma ever. So I don't know if that's like the correct comparison. Is Zoro greater than Oden? I would say Zoro's not greater than Oden just yet. Because, one, Oden would have... Oden versus Luchi would have been like... It wouldn't even been a panel. It would have been something that happens off screen. Like, Oda wouldn't have devoted any time to that. Oden versus Luchi would have been nothing. The biggest holdup with Zoro right now is what Gaban already told us, which is that Zoro doesn't have mastery over his Conqueror's Haki. My interpretation so far, based on several instances, are that Zoro is able to pull out Conqueror's Haki in moments of extreme like emotion and tapping into something, right? But not on a whim. That's kind of why we saw his Ashura moment against Kaido was something that Kaido recognized as, Zoro using Conqueror's Haki, but Zoro couldn't recognize it, right? Zoro didn't even really realize that he was using Conqueror's Haki against King, but he was at death's door and tapping into like a deeper side of himself, right? Zoro versus Luchi, I don't think he used Conqueror's Haki until he had that moment where Sanji calls him out, and then you immediately see Zoro go like enraged, and then the next attack has big like lightning streaks and stuff, and he immediately defeats Luchi. So my interpretation is basically my interpretation is just Zoro doesn't have. He's getting there, right? He's getting to a point where he can use, like he at full potential. He's like if you just threw Zoro into a fight with Oden, then I think Zoro loses because it's clear he can't tap into Conqueror's Haki like that. If you wanted to say, okay, well, what about this version of Zoro that like, I think Ashura Zoro versus Oden, that's where you have the discussion. I think even versus King, I don't think that version of Zoro beats Oden because even against King, Zoro was like, oh shit, like Enma's really difficult for me, right? And he was like, even versus King, when Zoro was starting to use his Conqueror's Haki well, he was marveling at how Oden is normally able to use this blade, right? Yeah. And we haven't seen Zoro even have a full fight with him using Conqueror's Haki since, we haven't seen Zoro using Conqueror's Haki since like for an extended period of time since the King fight, right? So to me, the way I look at Zoro, his peak moment with using Conqueror's Haki was Ashura against Kaido, right? Biggest feat, best feat, the feat that rivals Oden's, right? And basically that's the feat that you want to point to for Zoro's ceiling, like scarring a Yonko 1v1 while handicapped by broken bones, right? If you want to look at Zoro like fighting with Conqueror's Haki most consistently, then that's the fight versus King, right? But even in that fight, Zoro's kind of implying that he was looking up to Oden as being even more impressive. So to me, I think that either way you look, like if you look at the peak, Ashura Zoro versus Oden, I think that's a discussion for sure. Maybe Ashura Zoro is above Oden, but he can't do that at will or consistently from what we can see just yet. So that's hard to debate. And then Zoro using Conqueror's Haki consistently, that's the King fight. But even during the King fight, Zoro seems to acknowledge he's looking up at Oden, it seems like. So I don't think Zoro's at Oden's level just yet. 10K, thanks for the 2. Which statement of his implies former inferiority? Oh, from Mihawk? Okay, like, let's all just back up 1 second, right? Which is that from the very beginning, Oda never is putting Mihawk in the conversation for World's Strongest Man. Never, right? He introduces Whitebeard with the narrator title box, World's Strongest Man, right? Mihawk is introduced with World's Strongest Swordsman, right? So, ignore even Mihawk stuff. Oda, from the beginning of the story, is not putting Mihawk in that conversation, right? There's almost no reason to think Oda is introducing Mihawk as World's Strongest Swordsman when secretly Oda means World's Strongest Man, right? So let's get that out of the way. That to me, that's the most straightforward thing imaginable, right? But if we want to, and you have other characters, by the way, over the course of the story who refer to Whitebeard as the strongest pirate in general. That also encompasses Mihawk, right? So just from everything the narrative implies, it never seems to imply that Mihawk is Whitebeard's level. Now, if you look at Mihawk's own statement, it does reflect that, in that Mihawk is saying, he's talking about the gap, the distance between himself and Whitebeard. That's it. And he uses an attack to test that distance, to test Whitebeard's strength. It's pretty straightforward. Do you want the exact quote? Do we need to go down the line of the exact quote? Let's see. Chapter 553. The true distance between us and that man seems rather small. Yeah, so Mihawk is feeling like the gap, the perceived gap that he had between him and Whitebeard, he doesn't think that's the case anymore. And that, in fact, goes back to Mihawk's, literally his first statements in the story to Zoro, which is like, you should be able to judge the strength of your opponents by fucking looking at them, right? You shouldn't need to actually, you shouldn't be at a loss as to the distance between you and your opponent, right? So Mihawk is here basically saying like, okay, I thought Whitebeard's stronger, but the true distance between us and him, it doesn't seem that big. So Mihawk's basically testing out his theory. Yeah, Prophet Glutton says he's wondering if there was a gap he really didn't know. And that's looking at Whitebeard right now, right? To me, I feel like if you're a Mihawk fan, you have to acknowledge Whitebeard's superiority, because otherwise, then the Mihawk and Shanks debate reopens. Because Mihawk's entire claim to fame, right, the entire argument hinges on the world's strongest swordsman title, right? So if you're a Mihawk fan, you cannot, like, that's fine. But you cannot argue Mihawk versus Whitebeard then. Because your own argument hinges on the sanctity and absolute fact of titles, right? So you cannot argue Mihawk versus Whitebeard, because you can't have it both ways. If you want to argue Mihawk versus Whitebeard, that's fine. But then that now opens the door for a lot of other discussions. It reopens the door to Shanks versus Mihawk. It just does, because you're throwing out the title. So you have to understand that, like, what Mihawk you can't have it both ways, right? Like, if you treated this whole debate as like ABC baby logic from the beginning, which is like I'm not saying in a bad way, I'm just saying like keep it simple, stupid, right? World's strongest swordsman. Mihawk's a swordsman, Shanks is a swordsman. Done, right? Mihawk's stronger than Shanks. That's totally fair. Because, like, from your perspective, it's probably like, man, all these people are fucking idiots. It says Mihawk is the world's strongest swordsman. It's done. He is the strongest swordsman. Why are we even having discussion with him and Shanks? And that's a totally fair perspective, right? And that seems to have been valid at this point, this late in the story. But then you can't all of a sudden play dumb and throw out your own argument and be like, Whitebeard, the world's strongest man, was known as the world's strongest man. Interesting. And Mihawk is just the world's strongest swordsman. But nah, I think Mihawk is just, who gives a fuck about the titles? Mihawk was the world's strongest swordsman and the world's strongest man. Oda just never gave him that title. It's like, you can't have it both ways. So I just think that I think I'm just going to keep it as simple as that. I don't think there's that much to delve into. Because, like, you know you're being disingenuous if you're going to try and nitpick the fact that Whitebeard was the world's strongest man and Mihawk is just the world's strongest swordsman and be like, well, in this case, it actually doesn't apply because it's like, okay, if you're doing that, then the other argument opens up as well, and we're throwing that out, right? So just don't get greedy, right? You can't have it all. You can't have it all. Like, if you fought so hard for Mihawk greater than Shanks, right? You get that, right? Most people are giving that at this point, right? But now you can't use that same reasoning for Mihawk above Shanks to now try and argue Mihawk above Whitebeard. You get one or the other, right? I feel like if you had it the other way and were like, okay, well, maybe Shanks is above Mihawk or something like that, but like we could throw out titles or something by that logic, and then you could even argue Shanks and Mihawk above Whitebeard. But now, if you want to argue Mihawk above Shanks, then you can no longer argue Mihawk above Whitebeard. Does that make sense? And again, Mihawk's comments at Marineford make it pretty clear. Unless... Because the only other argument, like, what is the argument for Mihawk at Marineford to disprove his statement there? Because the only one I've seen is that he's the ruler meme, where it's like Mihawk was actually literally trying to measure how many meters are between them and Whitebeard, which makes no sense. Viv says Mihawk said distance between us and that man, not me and that man. I suggest you need to go back to like literally kindergarten level English, because what does us mean? What does us include? Does us include you? Yeah. Yeah, it does. All right, continue on. Continue on. Do you guys genuinely subscribe to the ruler theory that Mihawk was trying to measure how many meters are between them? All right, we're going to continue. We're going to continue on. All right. Nerve V Maker, thanks for the 10. Why are people so convinced that we will never see Mihawk and Shanks fight each other? I feel like since both groups are after the One Piece, there's a real chance we see them fight in the present day. I think that's definitely possible. I think it's possible. We might even see flashbacks of them fighting. Who knows? Tempo, thanks for being a Yonko. It's just that if the fight is already settled with Mihawk having won, I don't see the point of it. It's like, do we need to see a Kaino and Aokiji fight again? Tempo, thanks for being a Yonko team member for 3 months. How do we know the Knot's the best Joy Boy could do? It was stored for centuries, so it might be weaker. Emu was scared because the Haki was Joy Boys. Oh, you're saying that that's to explain shit? Well, the thing is that even if you ignore that, the Haki release is still like the largest scale thing that we've seen. Right? So, like, it kind of also fits just the description. Like, it is the largest scale, just pure Conqueror's Haki release that we've seen, you know? Isaac St. Charles, thanks a lot. You think Rocks dies at the end or inside Blackbeard's body? Also, I don't think Haki gets weaker over century. Like, that's, like, headcanon and stuff, but I think there's nothing that's really suggested that Joy Boy gave Emith like a shitty knot that doesn't actually do what it's supposed to do. The ruler is a straw man argument, so then what's the actual argument? Deputraviso says he was trying to measure how hard it would be for him to attack Whitebeard head on with his crew. No, because that's immediately disproven. That's literally disproven. I've seen people argue that. That's such a fucking stretch that makes no fucking sense in the first place. That makes no sense whatsoever. That Mihawk is... Like, what does he even mean? The true distance between us and that man seems rather small. Right? So, that doesn't even make sense to say that it's implying something about Whitebeard's crewmates. But the second thing is that it's disproven in the scene itself, because Mihawk is fucking surprised that that one of Whitebeard's crewmates gets involved. So if this was to test Whitebeard's crewmates' involvement, then why is he fucking surprised right here? Why? What the fuck is this? Why is he surprised? What the fuck is this? Why? It makes no sense. I would like to test whether Whitebeard's crewmates will try and stop us. What the fuck? What if Whitebeard's crewmates trying to stop us? It's like the most basic reading possible, which is just like Mihawk is a character at the top of his niche, right? Swords fighting. He values strength. This is the man who's above him. He has the world's strongest swordsman title, but this man has the world's strongest man title. Mihawk wants to measure the distance because from Mihawk's perspective, it doesn't seem that big. Interesting. What's going on here? Continuing on. Let's get stream likes up to 100 real quick. You think Rocks... Isaac St. Charles, thanks a lot. You think Rocks dies at the end or inside Blackbeard's body? You think Rocks dies at the end or inside Blackbeard's body? I feel like I'm just going to go with the straightforward. I think Rocks dies at the end. But, like, it would be really cool if there's something more to it. It would be really cool. Grizzly Adams, thanks for being a Pirate King tier member for 27 months, man. Am I crazy to think that what Roger's describing here is very similar to what Zoro figured out during his fight with King? No, if anything, it's similar to what we found out with Pika. Like, it's pretty... They're not saying anything crazy here. They're literally just saying... It's the same shit that Zoro said against King. Or, sorry, not King, sorry, Pika. Which is just... Pika's like, you can't cut me because I'm covered in Haki. And Zoro's like, that's only if your Haki is better than mine. It's been the same shit forever. Like, it's been the exact same shit forever. It's just stronger Haki beats Haki, you know? Yeah, I would love if there's something more to the Rock situation, but if he dies here, we will probably get a very emotional send-off chapter, so it works both ways. I just hope Oda doesn't do a fake-out death. Korn, thanks to the 2. At his old age, his title is because of his fruit. Yeah, but we know that he's had this title for some time, you know? Like, I think this is a silly argument. It's just like... I mean, if you want to get into that, then you could just say that, like... Well, Mihawk just has the title by default because Shanks lost his arm. You know? Like, if you want to... Like, you only get it one way or the other, which is either the titles are sacred and Mihawk greater than Shanks, or the titles don't mean jack shit. And then you could argue Mihawk greater than Whitebeard, but... you now lose your footing in Mihawk greater than Shanks, right? I prefer to keep things simple, which is just, we kind of know the tippy top of the One Piece world, obviously excluding Jobo and Emu. It's the Pirate King level characters, the ones that the story hypes up by far the most. Roger, Whitebeard, Garp, Rocks, that whole group, right? Harold, basically just on a totally different level. And then you got what it seems like to be the tippy top of Yonko tier characters. Then you got, like, your Mihawk, Shanks, Dragon. Maybe Dragon reaches that next year. We don't know. I think Dragon's at the very least at the tippy top of Yonko tier. You got your Kaidos, Big Moms, probably Loki or some shit. It seems pretty straightforward at this point, the way things are kind of scaled out. And again, if you want Zoro to be Pirate King level at the end of the story, or even stronger, that's fine. Because that's not contingent on Mihawk being Pirate King tier. Those are two different things. Zoro, end of story, is stronger than Mihawk, end of story. Hassan, thanks for the 2. Mihawk is the world's strongest swordsman of today. Not all time, that's it. Yep. Paul, thanks for the 2. Doflamingo versus Fujitora. Hype left unfinished. Oh, yeah. Okay, we should list the fights. All right, hold on. I want to take it from the beginning of the story. So... hold on. Eric says, Morge just don't engage, lol, they will never stop. I kind of got it, though, because, like, one, as much as, okay, you will be able to tell when I'm sick of the power scaling discussions or whatever, because then I'm, like, in a, like, exasperated mood. I guess I'm always in a somewhat exasperated mood, but I don't, even if I'm being baited and pulled into this discussion over and over, like, it still fun for me to somewhat go down these trains of discussion. It just is. So, like, it's not like, if I didn't somewhat enjoy this, right, I just wouldn't even answer those questions. Like, it's kind of like if somebody posted shipping questions, like, more do you think, I don't know, Kobe times this person, like, Kobe times Akainu's granddaughter or something like that. Like, can you tell us your thoughts on that? Like, those aren't things that entertain me that much, so that wouldn't be... It's not hard for me to not engage with things, but I engage with things that I do feel to some degree, some twisted joy out of engaging with. Does that make sense? So, like, you know, it's a dumb, toxic, wet, like, flow of discussions that come out of this, but at the same time, if I didn't at least enjoy talking about it, then it just, you know, it's not like I'm being trapped. I mean, people are trapping me by playing to my my weak points, the things that I do, like, have fun discussing. But it's like, if it was stuff that I actually don't want to talk about, then it would be pretty straightforward in that, like, I just don't have thoughts on that, you know? Yeah, let's start from the beginning of the story. Nerve and V-Maker, thanks for the 10. I always felt that Mihawk went to Marineford because he believed Whitebeard would be stronger than him and wanted to fight. He then realized that the gap was no longer there due to Whitebeard's age. Hey, that's entirely possible, but I also feel like that falls in the territory of headcanon, because then it's just like, there's nothing that really suggests that that's why he went. If anything, if we were to look at the reasons that he went that seem to make sense, it's that Mihawk doesn't like to be bothered, right? He doesn't want to lose his Shichibukai status. That's pretty much it. Because he found it to be a headache once he lost Shichibukai status, right? He's like, now I gotta pack up, I gotta leave, because all the fucking Marines are chasing after me, I want a quiet, peaceful life, yada yada. Basically, and the world government threatened, we already saw from Hancock, they're threatening to revoke your Shichibukai status if you don't show up to Marineford. The clearer answer is just, they showed up because they don't want to lose their Shichibukai status. Because, again, the whole reason they were allowed to make this deal, I've done this rant in the past or whatever, but the only reason the world government really signed the deal with the Shichibukai to become Shichibukai is to help fight against the Yonko, right? And this is the first time that in, like, years in history that they're actually enlisting their help, and they're like, okay, it's time for you to do the thing that you signed this deal to do, which is fight the Yonko. Please do that. And then, so it's kind of just like, you have to at least show up. You know, you got to at least show up to do the one thing, the one gig that you said that you would do, right? For him, it's like, he's not worried. There's nobody on that side that's going to kill him, you know? Or actually be like a significant fight, except for, weirdly, you know, we'll never be able to square this away, the whole Vista situation. Yeah. But I don't think he went because he actually wanted to fight Whitebeard, you know? I think his curiosity was clearly there, but I don't think it was like a thing in his mind. With Kaido, I'm always going to be curious. Like, now that we know his and Whitebeard's relationship, I'm always going to be curious, like, did Kaido go to try to intercept Whitebeard to try and fight him one last time, like many people believed for years, or was it to help? We'll never know. We'll never know. Urgert, thanks to the 2. Dragon intro being the first guy to make Emu bleed. So this is weird because, like, I'll never understand why people say this. I don't get it. Because Rocks already made him bleed. Right? Rocks already does that right away. Look, Rocks makes Emu bleed. So that's also partly why I don't think Emu's like just invincible or whatever, because you can damage him. It just happened at the very beginning of the fight. Demonio, thanks for the 2. I wonder how Zoro will prove he is on that Pirate King tier. I mean, beating Mihawk should do it, right? because if you're like clearly above the characters that are at the top of Yonko tier, then that probably puts you at that tier. I also kind of hope that like we get to see some level of team up of characters against Emu too. So it'd be cool to see Zoro involved in that fight, because Zoro got to be involved. Zoro does get to be involved, low-key, in some pretty cool showdowns, like versus NL. Zoro was invited to the rooftop to fight Kaido and was pretty much the MVP besides Luffy. So like, you know, you never know who's gonna end up in that showdown. Meek, thanks for the 10. I gotta go in about 2 minutes, so don't forget about Kyrros versus Diamante, my favorite non-Luffy fight. I just think Diamante's ability is so lame. Demonio says that's Saturn's body. I guess that's a fair argument, but let's take a look. So when we see the attacks being done to Emu, is it all just to Emu's body and none of it goes to Saturn's body? Okay, so, because let's see. So the legs here seem to be destroyed, but are they reforming? Let's see. It seems to me like the legs reform. Maybe they're not reforming. Do we get a better shot at this later? I guess we don't. Yeah, I guess there's just a lack of clarity, because Emu leaves after this, right? Yeah, so I guess there's the argument there. I don't know, I kind of just assumed that, like, once Emu's taken over the body, then it's just his body. Because, like, I guess let's wait and see with the Gunko situation, right? Because with Gunko, if they have trouble damaging Gunko and stuff like that, then it would fly that Rocks did actually, then it seems like the possessed body also takes on Emu's abilities, right? No one's discussing this current point. That's Saturn's body, though. Do we agree with this? I'm Did Rock successfully cut Emu here? Did Rock successfully cut Emu? I don't know what the... I get the argument that it's Saturn's body, but like, then in Gunko's body, are we not going to see the crazy regeneration and stuff? All right, let's get the stream likes up to 80 real quick. All right, continuing on. Tiptia Treviso, thanks for the 10. The thing is that the world's strongest swordsman and world's strongest man should belong to the same person, since the only swords people were equal to Whitebeard minus Garp, but it feels like MVP and first team in sports not matching. No, because in the old era, I don't think there was a clear number one at any point. If Rock, because like even Rock's, his equal is Herald. I guess you could say Herald was a giant, not a man or whatever. But Oda just didn't seem, it seems like in that era, especially with like Rocks, Roger, Garp all running around pretty much in their primes, Oda didn't want to give, like there was no undisputed, right? But then obviously in the last 20 years, right, post Roger's death, Whitebeard's held that title of world's strongest man. Hold on. Second. Yeah, and the thing to remember also is that, so Mihawk would have had his title since like near the beginning of this era, right? Because that's when Luffy and Shanks' whole thing went down, right? And Whitebeard he's only been on life support and shit for like the last couple years or so. Because we know from the whole Ace backstory that Whitebeard was still pretty much the top dog and pretty damn healthy even as of a few years ago. Umair, thanks for the 5. How you been, Mort? Saw your Mihawk Shanks statement. I see where you're coming from. Does that mean Mihawk greater than Roger or even Rocks? Just a genuine question. No, because the thing I've been saying is that Mihawk, Whitebeard, that's the simplest point of comparison. Mihawk is the world's strongest swordsman today, but not of all time. If he was of all time, then of course that would include Roger and Rocks and stuff. But that doesn't seem to be his title. He's the world's strongest swordsman today. He was never the world's strongest man. Implies Whitebeard was above Mihawk, which implies that Roger, Rocks, etc. above Mihawk. Meek, thanks to the 5. Nah, but Kyrros' dialogue is genuinely insane. If I'm solid anything, then I'm this country's solid rage. Makes me shake in excitement. I'm not going to lie. I literally fucking forgot that dialogue. I don't... If you'd asked me if that dialogue exists in One Piece, I would have told you I don't know what that is. I don't know where I would have told you where that's from. I don't remember that. Let me read Kyrros' fight again. Kyrros' fight would be somewhere around... Also, let me do a little poll. Did Rocks damage Emu? Or is it just Saturn's body? Counts... Disaster Master says, you see Emu's shadow peel off Saturn's legs. Okay, that makes sense. Damn, so poor Saturn's just getting fucked up for no reason here. Alright, so this would probably be around chapter 775. Check this out. Oh, damn, I think I'm one off. I think it's 776. My bad. 777 is Zoro versus Pika. 778 is where Zoro versus Pika concludes. What is your body made of? Solid steel? No, it must be solid stupidity. Oh, this is a good line. If I'm solid anything, then I'm this country's solid rage, here to vanquish you. You know why I don't think I cared about this fight? It's not because I didn't think Kyrros is cool. I found Diamante to be really lame and underwhelming. So I think I just didn't give a shit about this fight in that case. I also found his ability to be really lame too. Like, his ability is versatile and effective when you think about it a little bit. It's like, okay, he can do this or that. Like, he could pull out spikes or an umbrella. And making the ground wavy also feels... it's like, okay, that's kind of a cute ability. I feel like it's especially effective because Kyrros happens to have one leg, whereas, as you might notice, Robin and Rebecca don't seem to have any problem standing up. But, you get the idea. Like, if I were to describe Diamante's ability, it feels a little bit like just Usopp on steroids. It's like, aha! But have you considered if I pulled out, like, a million little spike caltrops out of my pocket or something like that? It's like, I guess so. And I know he's a swordsman too, but he never seemed like a competent swordsman. Because, like, people talk about the Colosseum fight where, you know, Colosseum fight was Sabo, Burgess, Diamante, Bartolomeo, and Rebecca. And people kind of shit on Burgess for that fight. But I'm just like, well, Burgess did the second best job. Like, nobody even talks about it. Diamante attacks Sabo once. And I think his sword breaks or something immediately. It's pretty useless. Bro, Luffy can do that as a side effect? Yeah. I mean, Diamante's not even the best in terms of, like, pulling out items, because there's that hammer space guy from Whitebeard's crew. So I just don't know. Also, let's get the stream likes up to 100 real quick. Let's get stream likes up to 100. Kenji YST says he taught Law swordsmanship. That's how you know he sucks at swordsmanship. That's actually a very, very good point. It's like, Zoro, who's your master? Mihawk. Law, who's your master? Diamante. All right, anyway, let's get to the main topic. Oh shit. I forgot, that's the whole point. Let's get to the main topic. Okay, so nobody has successfully damaged Emu himself then yet. Yeah, I think it'd be really cool if Dragon is the first person to damage Emu. Because I look at, like, it's a common sort of... Here's my prediction. My prediction is Dragon will have a sort of wiper moment where he has something that he's been saving as his, like, ace trump card for a long time. That he gets the opening, uses it on Emu/NL, right? Seems like it works, actually manages to hurt him, but then doesn't work. You know? Because of some bullshit. Immortality or whatever, right? It's kind of similar to what Law did with Doflamingo and the Gamma Knife. Didn't work because of some bullshit. Alright, let's get into it. Okay, starting from the beginning of the story. Best non-Straw Hat fight. I can't think of anything from early on in the series. Nothing from early on in the series. We could include shit like Pell versus... No, Robin's a Straw Hat. Okay, so early series is easy. Skypiea is where we get some stuff, right? Skypiea, I think Wiper versus Shura, even Wiper versus NL, too short. Because really it's like Zoro, Gonfall, Robin, and Wiper versus NL. It's just too short. It's too short. So we move past that. I think, is it Ace versus Blackbeard as our first big one? Ace versus Blackbeard as our first big one? Dory versus Brogy, but we're trying to pick a top 16. So do we realistically think Dory versus Brogy is making it in there? I don't think so. Mihawk versus Don Krieg, that's off screen. Elias Taveras, thanks for the 5. Your Dragon Cope is embarrassing. You're narrative flipping how weak he is. Whoa, what? My Dragon Cope? Dragon? What? When did I even talk about Dragon? I don't know when I talked about Dragon. Weren't we just talking about Shanks versus Mihawk? I also just said I think Dragon could be the first person to damage Emu. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Dragon... Like, I personally feel, because Oda's done this scenario twice, with NL and Doflamingo, who are Emu's two direct parallels. I wouldn't be surprised if Dragon has some ace saved up his sleeve. Ace. I wouldn't be surprised if he has some ace up his sleeve that he's saving, that he will attempt to use on Emu. It won't... Like, I think it'll do some serious damage, like Wiper did to NL, Law did to Doflamingo. I think it won't be enough to kill him, but... Because I think he'll survive through some bullshit, because that Oda kind of likes to play that sort of game. But yeah. that he's going to hurt Emu? I don't understand the comment. Rain Iwakura says, Moch, is there still time to ask Pirate King questions for the podcast? I forgot to send them this month. You can still get them in right now. I've not recorded just yet, but this is the last point in time. I'm actually confused. I don't understand. Ace versus Blackbeard was off screen. We only saw clashes. Ace versus Blackbeard is actually the longest top tier, or the longest non-Straw Hat fight that we've seen that isn't in it's the longest fight we've seen that's not in the Straw Hat's own conflict. Does that make sense? So, like, for example, in Dressrosa, the Strahts, like, the story is the Strahts versus Don Quixote pirates, right? So in that conflict, Oda is willing to give full-on chapters to a fight like Kyrros versus Diamante, Sai versus Aokiji, stuff like that, right? The fights that readers... So if you notice, the fights that readers generally complain Oda cuts away from, or like doesn't show us much of, are all fights that are not related to the Straw Hat's own story. Okay, or the Straw Hat's own conflict of trying to overcome the villains. Okay, so like Ace versus Blackbeard, Law versus Blackbeard, Garp versus Aokiji, and then Sabo versus Fujitora, stuff like that. Anything that's not related to like the Straw Hats, like to the defeat of the villains of the arc, right? Oda's basically, I guess the simplest way to say it is like, when it comes to defeating the villains of the arc, that is when Oda is willing to write extended fights. That's when he writes the full-on, give it a chapter. And he'll do it even for characters that aren't Straw Hats, right? Like we saw in Dressrosa, like we even saw in Wano to some degree, right? Of course, yeah, like Kid Law versus Big Mom. If it's not actually defeating the villains of the arc, of the storyline, Oda rarely gives full chapters. Ace versus Blackbeard is the exception. Because Ace versus Blackbeard is actually a full chapter and a half long, which is kind of insane. Oda's never done anything like that again for a fight that is not about defeating the villains of the arc. Garp versus Kuzan was longer, I think? No. Garp versus the whole Blackbeard pirates, you could argue, was longer, but Garp versus Kuzan is like, put it all together, it's like 3 pages. I also think I would like to change the language, because there is no Garp versus Aokiji fight. It's Garp versus the Blackbeard pirates. It's like Garp versus the world. I think Admiral fans just like hyper-fixate on it being like Aokiji versus Garp. It's like, no. Aokiji himself tells you he could not do it alone. It was a team effort. It's not like the narrative doesn't even frame it as Garp versus the Blackbeard pirates. Literally, it's Garp versus... the narrative doesn't even frame it as Garp versus Aokiji. The narrative frames it as like Garp versus the entire Blackbeard Pirates crew that is at Hachinosu. Aokiji is their strongest member, but no one's taken Garp by themselves. And in this, by the way, I'm not going to be writing Garp versus Aokiji, because there's no such fight exists. It's Garp versus everybody. It's Garp versus everybody. That'd be like me saying like Big Mom versus Kid. There's no Big Mom versus Kid fight. There's Big Mom versus Kid and Law, but there's no Big Mom versus Kid. Shiki versus Garp. No, it's Shiki versus Garp and Sengoku. I think that's the worst part of like the Admiral's propaganda around like Garp versus Aokiji. They managed to frame the whole fight as something that it's not. It was like Garp versus everybody. Anyway, continuing on. Abraham Jean-Louis, thanks for the 2. Kuzan versus Garp. Oh my god, there was no Kuzan versus... There's no such fight. The fight doesn't exist. Oden versus Kaido, Kizaru versus Shanks. With like Luffy versus Kaido, or like Luffy versus Doflamingo, at least with those fights, like you could argue like there was a whole bunch of other characters involved and stuff. But the reality is that the majority of the fight turned into Luffy versus Kaido, right? There's like 10 chapters where there's like other characters involved, but then the final round, right? You could count it in rounds, right? Like, Luffy versus Kaido final round, it's just Luffy versus Kaido. If anything, Kaido gets some help in the final round thanks to CP0. Same with, like, Luffy versus Doflamingo. It's a separate round, right? Garp versus Aokiji, it's all Garp versus all the Blackbeard pirates the whole time. He has, like, interactions with everybody, and he's taking turns. There's no individual, like, right before there's no moment where it's just Garp focusing on Aokiji. Like, he takes turns. Like, it's like, okay, I just threw San Juan Wolf in the water. I just blocked Vasco's shots attack. I just fucking got stabbed by Kobe. Now I'm punching Aokiji. Now I'm moving past Aokiji to stop fucking Avalo Pizarro. There's no point where Oda's trying to make it seem like it's just Garp versus Aokiji, because it's clear that that Aokiji gets handled by Garp. As Aokiji himself admits. Continuing on. All right, Abraham Jean-Louis, I see what you're saying, but we're going to go through it a little bit slowly. Kizaru versus Shanks is also movie stuff. We're going to say only canon. Only canon. No anime filler / movies. All right, Ace versus Blackbeard. Shanks versus Whitebeard, their clash was too short. But I remember back in the day, if you're a One Piece fan back in the day, Shanks versus Whitebeard was, like, really hype. Like, especially when it happened in the anime. Like, that was the thing that people were really looking forward to. I was certainly looking forward to. And then Ace versus Blackbeard was, like, the other really big deal that happened, and that was an actual extended fight. But Shanks versus Whitebeard, that pulled views on YouTube, and that was just a showdown. That's how, like, deprived One Piece fans fans were of action for so long. All right, continuing on. Hassan, thanks for the 5. Morge, if the key to beating Emu is Luffy sharing Gear 5 like Naruto did, I'd be furious. He's also setting up Luffy and Blackbeard versus Emu like Naruto and Sasuke. The key difference to me is I think that Blackbeard is just, like, a giant piece of shit. Like, I feel like people are looking at, like, well, look, Rocks was such a good guy, and we saw everybody teaming up with Rocks to fight Emu and stuff. But to me, the thing that keeps standing out is that everything Oda did with Rocks was almost to illustrate why Blackbeard is just the biggest piece of shit ever. Not the biggest piece of shit ever, but, like, a giant piece of shit in comparison. It's to make us feel, in my opinion, like, whereas we can look at Rocks in a new light and understand that, like, banding together with Rocks to fight against the greater evil Emu, that was the right thing to do. I feel like morally Oda's painting Blackbeard as just being such a bastardized and, like, inherently evil version of Rocks that I don't know if Oda's going to go down that same route. I think I would personally really not enjoy if it's Emu and Blackbeard, or Luffy and Blackbeard versus Emu, and then Luffy versus Blackbeard. I don't think I would mind if it's like a team effort versus Emu, with Blackbeard then stealing Emu's ability, and then Luffy has to defeat Blackbeard, personally. And I would not like Luffy sharing Gear 5 like Naruto. It just seems kind of ridiculous to me. 10K, thanks for the 5. Emotional struggle between Aokiji and Garp was the main focus. Other parts were basically fodder, not talking about scaling here. Yeah, if you want to talk in emotional storytelling, I would agree that the main focus was between Garp and Aokiji. But, put it this way, if Oda thought that Aokiji could take Blackbeard by himself, take Garp by himself, he would have just done that. There's no reason to involve the rest of the Blackbeard pirates. Other than to make it a level playing field. Like, there's no reason for Oda to have Shiryu punch a hole inside Garp, unless you're trying to even the odds. It's the same way Oda had Squardo stab Whitebeard. It's to nerf him a little bit. Same reason that Oda gave Whitebeard heart attacks and stuff. It's to nerf the character. It's not that complicated. All right, Ace versus Blackbeard. What happens next? So, Thriller Bark, no major anything, right? Nothing Thriller Bark that I can think of. Saboti, we get Rayleigh versus Kizaru. We could say Kizaru versus Supernova. I think that's a great fight. I think Rayleigh versus Kizaru is long enough to make the cut. And Rayleigh versus Kizaru was an extremely exciting fight when it first happened. When it first took place. Amazon Lily, I think we got nothing. Hancock Mamanga is too short. Impel Down, I don't think we got anything. You could say Ivankov versus Magellan. I think we might be scraping the bottom of the barrel here. Marineford. I think Marineford Whitebeard versus Akainu is the only one that really makes the list. I think Marco versus Kizaru, because Whitebeard versus Akainu, I can string together. They had two separate interactions, you know? I also say, I'll say white fight can't be too short. We could say exception. Nah. I think Whitebeard versus Akainu, even though it's a short exchange at the end, they were fighting earlier as well. So I think it works. It also just feels significant enough that I think we can put it in, you know? I don't think Vista versus Mihawk is going to crack the top 16, you know? Corn, thanks for the 2. Do you think emotional conflict can nerf Haki? Yeah, they were both shown to be emotionally conflicted. And I do think it can nerf Haki. I think that's why Aokiji was very lucky, because Garp didn't use any of his Galaxy Impact, Galaxy Divide moves or anything on him. Certainly not like his final move that he used on Emu or something. Garp basically put the kid gloves on against Aokiji. Didn't use Advanced Conqueror's Haki Punch or anything when they clashed, because Aokiji doesn't have... Like, keep in mind, even if Aokiji's in, like, perfect... This is why I think the argument's silly. It's established that Aokiji can't freeze Garp, right? That's established right off the bat. He cannot freeze Garp because Garp has Conqueror's Haki, right? 2, even if Aokiji's Haki is nerfed, Garp is clearly shown to not use his big punch moves on Aokiji, right? That's clearly shown, right? But even if we say Aokiji's Haki is nerfed, Aokiji doesn't have Conqueror's Haki. So even at his best, it's just his armament Haki trying to fight Garp's Conqueror's Haki, which Garp was kind enough not to use on him, right? So I don't understand the argument. Like, it's like, whatever you think Aokiji's peak Haki strength is, it's automatically worse than Garp's because he can't use Conquerors. It just doesn't make any sort of, like, I just don't get what the argument is. It's like, is he I think it's pretty binary. Is Aokiji a Conqueror's Haki user or not? No? Okay, then it doesn't really matter if he's nerfed or not, because either way, he can't use the level of Haki you would need to actually fight Garp's Galaxy moves or anything like that. You know, it's pretty straightforward. Lockwin Dog, thanks a lot. What are some non-Stride fights with BET cash we'll see? You'd bet cash we'll see. Some non-Stride fights that I'd bet cash that we'll see. I think Shanks Shamrock. I feel like Dragon Garling is a good bet. I feel like... Would I bet cash? Ones that, like, matchups that I think are very solidly likely, like Kobe Luchi. I think that's a good one. I don't know if I'd bet cash, but I think it's a really very likely one. Based on a lot of factors. I still need to put out that video. I think Shanks Blackbeard, I would bet cash that we would see. Yeah, those are some main ones. Admirals seem like the normal ceiling for characters without Conqueror's Haki. Yeah. Clyde says Garp wasn't holding back. He literally says at the beginning that his goal is just to get Aokiji to come back to the Marines, which means he's not fighting to, like, kill Aokiji like he was here against Rocks. So by definition, holding back. The second point, people fucking forget this. Literally in the fight, when Aokiji gets back up from Blue Hole, Garp is like, you want to keep going at Kuzan? Like, it's not like Garp wants to keep fighting Kuzan. He's giving him an out. Like, we don't have to keep going. He was fine just doing the Blue Hole and leaving him alone. I don't know, like, people have selective memory with that whole battle. Okay, continuing on. Is there anything else from Marineford that we feel like qualifies as a big enough fight here? Like, I guess I'd say Marco versus Kizaru was like a memorable one, right? Henchme976, thanks for the 5. The monopoly of the world swordsmanship and association needs to be challenged. Luchi and Garp deserve strongest Rokushiki man and boxer titles too. Yeah, it's funny that there's no other individual titles like that. Blackbeard versus Sengoku. I think those are too short. Like, can't be too short in terms of panel time. You know? Like, because then you can get into like, well, Whitebeard versus Big Mom, they fought for like a day and a night, but we're talking about on page, you know? Do we want to put in Marco versus Kizaru? We could put in Marco versus Kizaru. I just don't think that's... I think that's maybe too short. I'll keep it at that. Vista versus Mihawk, I think, is too short. Well, I mean, even if we put Vista versus Mihawk, it's not going to make our top 16. Only 16 fights will make the cut. So it's just like, nobody's going to vote for that. L losses, almost none of these are full fights. We can do some culling. Let's just put the options. Let's put the options down. Okay, Whitebeard versus Akainu. Okay, so then we wrap Marineford. Now we're on to the post-time skip. Nothing really with Fishman Island, right? So Fishman Island, we crossed that. Law versus Smoker. I think this is our first really good one since Ace versus Blackbeard, and that we get a lot of extended stuff. Law versus Smoker. Smoker versus Doflamingo is too short. You could say Law and Smoker versus Virgo. Team fights are allowed. Law versus Smoker. Law and Smoker versus Virgo. Then Dressrosa had some really good options, right? Dressrosa gave us Law versus Smoker and... Oh, no, not Smoker. Doflamingo and Fujitora. This was the section of the story that really fucking pissed me off. Because, like, I've complained so often about how it just became, like law piece, basically, right? This is what I'm talking about. Like, this is, like, Law's getting more fights back to back to back than, like, fucking... Like, you know how long it was before Sanji got a fight? Like an actual fight, not just him getting his leg cracked by Virgo or whatever, or like 3 panels versus Doflamingo. This was just fucking insane. And Sanji's supposed to be like the 3rd most prominent Strahd in terms of getting fights. Law was getting more. Fuck Sanji. Law was getting more than fucking Luffy and Zoro, basically. I mean, if you count all of Luffy's bullshit fights, like Luffy versus like Hajruden or some shit, then sure. But this was like really, really annoying. So we got Law versus Doflamingo and Fujitora. You could argue that Law's next fight with Doflamingo, like Law's fight with Doflamingo, it continues onto the bridge, right? So you could argue that that's a separate battle. What do you guys feel? Sanji versus Daifuku was peak. Elias Taveras, thanks for the 5. Shanks ended the war without hurting anyone. Mihawk started the war and didn't hurt anyone. That's actually kind of funny. Mihawk was the first top tier to throw a shot, right? As far as I can recall. He's the first one to throw a shot. Is that right? No, did Aokiji throw the first shot? No, Aokiji was the first top tier to throw a shot. No, Whitebeard really was. He did the 2 tidal... Memory serves, Whitebeard does the 2 tidal waves. Aokiji freezes it. Aokiji goes after Whitebeard. Whitebeard stops him. I think then you get to Mihawk... Is that right? I think then you get to Mihawk... Yeah, that must be right. Then you get to Mihawk attacking Whitebeard. Then you get to Kizaru attacking Whitebeard. Yeah. Doflamingo versus Smoker is not going to make the final cut. Dressrosa was a Law arc. Yeah, but Punk Hazard... That's the crazy thing. Punk Hazard and Dressrosa were both Law-centric storylines. And he dominated the story in a manner that no other character had ever done outside of a Straw Hat. Like, absolutely dominated it and dominated the action. That's the crazy thing. For what up till then was the longest storyline in One Piece. Like, Punk Hazard through Dressrosa... That whole saga, I think, is longer than any other saga that One Piece had had up to that point in time. And it was all Law. It was mind-blowing. People just ate it up. They're like, oh my god, One Piece needed Sasuke. It needed a Sasuke knockoff. That's what was really missing. Fuck the Straw Hats. We would rather be reading Naruto. Should Law versus Doflamingo on the bridge be a separate fight from Law versus Doflamingo and I think I would lean towards it being a continuation as well. I think I would lean towards it being a continuation. Yeah. I think you need a... What are some other examples? Because, so, with Whitebeard versus Akainu, I'm kind of stringing together. They kind of faced off twice at Marineford. I'm kind of stringing that together. If we were to just count one, obviously we'd count the second thing. Ricky says Garp versus Aokiji. I mean, that's a good example, right? So, like, if we want to count... Really, it's Garp versus the full Blackbeard pirates, but, like, Garp versus Aokiji, if we were to call that a fight, that had some significant pauses while Aokiji had to get himself out of the hole while Garp was doing a whole bunch of other stuff. We'll just count it as a continuation, just for the sake of being able to include more matchups. It's not going to be in the top 16 anyway. I think this was, like, a really good overall fight. I thought, like, Law versus Doflamingo and Fujitora, that was really fucking hype when it happened, because, like, it starts with Fujitora pulling down... This was, like, when Devil Fruit stuff was at its coolest in One Piece. I think this is, like... Devil Fruit stuff really looked cool, obviously, during Marineford. Because Marineford, we were starting to get Haki, of course. But the characters that we were really seeing fight were mainly using their Devil Fruits. Like, even Whitebeard, as the only Conqueror's Haki user, advanced Conqueror's Haki user, really, he couldn't use his shit then, right? So it was really his fruit that was carrying him at that point in time. Obviously, he could use armament, but it was established that he couldn't use Conqueror's Haki at that point, right? So his fruit was carrying him. The only moments that we got to see, like, just how strong, like, a glimpse of how strong Haki is at Marineford was Garp stepping in and being the only one who could damage Marco. Like, none of the admirals could even damage Marco. So Garp stepping in and with one casual punch damaging Marco. And then Shanks at the end stepping in and stopping Akainu, right? So those were the only two significant moments where it's like, oh shit, Haki specialists or whatever, like characters with really strong Haki, they might even be above Devil Fruit characters or whatever, right? But at that point in time, Haki's superiority to Devil Fruits was not really a thing. Then we entered the New World, and again, we weren't really seeing top-tier Haki users just yet. So I'd say, like, around this point in time in the story, Law, Doflamingo, and Fujitora fighting, that was when we were getting, like, some really cool Devil Fruit abilities, right? This is a trio of some of Oda's most versatile Devil Fruit users in One Piece. Like, Law's abilities, crazy unique Devil Fruit powers. Doflamingo has extremely versatile Devil Fruit powers. And then Fujitora, obviously, gravity. Why did I say it like that? Gravity, really, really strong ability, right? So this was a great little showdown. It would have been great to see more of it, but I still remember that opening chapter of Fujitora calling down the meteor, and then Law and Doflamingo having to deal with it in their own ways. That was really sick. That was really, really cool. And then, and then it continued. We got some of Law versus Doflamingo. That was just like high stocks in terms of Devil Fruit abilities. It's really as the story progressed through Whole Cake and then Wano that it began to become more clear that, because that was the time that Luffy had to start upgrading his Devil Fruit, or his Haki. Everyone had to start upgrading their Haki. Yeah. Sabo. I mean, we could do Sabo versus Burgess. And you know what? We'll combine the fights between from them. We could combine the fights, you know, from Colosseum through not Colosseum, you know? Sabo versus Burgess, Sabo versus Fujitora. The other good fights, Kyrros versus Diamante, Sai versus Laoji and Baby 5. Am I forgetting anything there? Law versus Doflamingo and Fuji got me into reading One Piece. Hadruden versus Makvis. Yeah, we could put that in. I don't know if this stuff will make the top 16 cut. Hadruden versus Makvis. I think I told you guys, like, one of the things that got my friend into One Piece after he, like, thought it was not that good, after I tried and failed to get him in because of fucking Chocho the dog, he dropped it, was him, like, on some bus trip where one of his friends was fucking watching, it was like some college trip where they're all coming back from something, right? And one of his friends on the bus was watching a scene from One Piece on the phone, and it was Fujitora at the end of Dressrosa raising all the rubble on the island. And then my friend was like, wait, what's that? And then the other guy replied that it's like One Piece, and then that blew his mind, so then he went home and started watching One Piece again. But he skipped a bunch of arcs. He skipped all the way to fucking Alabasta. But I was like, I think I told you guys this. Like, I was just like, okay, you do it your way. Because I already tried getting him to do it from the beginning. He did not like that. So I'm like, you just do it. You do it your way. Whatever works. 10K, thanks for the 2. Do a poll on whether Garp versus Aokiji counts. It'll count. It'll just be Garp versus the Blackbeard Pirates. Because it would just include the whole thing. Dreams. Thanks a lot. Sabo versus Elder/Emu. No, because we're not doing, like, it's not about racing, like who made the best escapes. We could do that as a separate thing, like best escapes in One Piece. Then we could put Sabo in there. Let's get Streamlabs up to 150 real quick. All right. Hadruden versus Makvis. Continuing on from Dressrosa. I think that covers everything there. Nothing really with Zoe. Inuarashi Nekomamushi versus Jack. I think those fights are too short. Nothing really from Whole Cake Island. Continuing on. Nothing in between. And so then we hit Wano. And Wano has, I guess, Inuarashi versus Scabbards versus Kaido. I think Oden versus Kaido is too short. And it just wouldn't make the top 16, right? Scabbards versus Kaido. Inuarashi versus Jack. Rise versus Fukurokuju. Killer versus Hawkins. Law and Kid versus Lawn Kid versus Big Mom. Covers everyone, right? Then we get out of there. Nothing before we get Shanks versus Kid. That one's pretty short, but if you count the Future Sight scene, you could argue it makes the cut. I still feel like Shanks versus Kid should count, because it's pretty, like, you do see all of the action. That's the thing. I think I'm going to include Shanks versus Kid, because it's like a pretty iconic fight. I guess that's the same excuse for Whitebeard versus Akainu. Fight can't be too short in terms of panel time. Exception to length can be if fight is really iconic. Shanks versus Kid happens. Garp versus Blackbeard. Pirates. Law versus Blackbeard happened first. I think then we get to Rocks versus Harold. Rocks versus Harold. And then we get to, I'd say, Dami, Reversey, Rocks versus... Do we want to do Garp versus the Yonko? I don't think that makes the cut. Then put Oden versus Kaido. Okay, I can put Oden versus Kaido by that logic. Where was it? Okay. Dami Reversi Rocks versus Roger, Garp, Whitebeard, Kaido, Big Mom. And that pretty much catches us up, right? Now, here's what I would like to do. I kind of want to exclude every fight that involves defeating the villains of the arc. So, does that make sense? So, nah, I feel like that's not right. We can keep that. Like, I want to exclude the fights that are like Kyrros versus Diamante, Sai versus Lao G, and Baby 5. I want to keep... It's hard to explain what I mean. Oda will always show a full fight if it's something that's about resolving the conflict of the arc. What I'm more interested in is the fights that he kind of cuts away to, that aren't really tied to the arc itself, you know? Like when Oda cut away to show Ace versus Blackbeard, right? Those are the fights that I'm more interested in, but I guess that the definitions become a little bit too difficult to police. Yeah, too many rules. Okay, then what do we want to cut here? Oh, Scabbards versus... I guess Scabbards and Shanks versus Green Bull. We could include that. That actually definitely fits. Do we want to include Revolutionaries versus Fujitora? And I think maybe we could include that. Karasu / Morley versus Green Bull and Fujitora. Do we want to include that? Or do we just call that off screen? Yeah, it's off screen. Yeah, actually, the bigger question is, do we think insert this fight could go far in a, like, does it qualify? What are we cutting from the bracket, right? We want to get it down to 16. We want to get it down to 16. So Ace versus Blackbeard stays. I think Kizaru Supernova, Rayleigh Kizaru. I think Ivankov versus Magellan, nobody thinks of as a great fight, right? Let's cut Ivankov. Let's cut this, right? So that's an example. I'm going to show the ones I'm crossing off. Why can't I cross this off? Is there a way I can cross this off? Maybe I can't cross that off. What I'm thinking of cutting is Ivankov versus Magellan. I'm thinking of cutting Sabo versus Burgess. Thinking of cutting Inuarashi versus... Okay. Oh, Gabon versus Sommers. I think that's actually a pretty sick fight. I think that's a good one, in my opinion. Yamato versus Kaido. Yeah. Yamato versus Kaido. Whitebeard versus Roger. That's just one clash. Fuck, maybe we just put them all. We got 24. Okay, how about this? Help me get it down to 24, and then I can at least put it into a bracket. And some fights will just naturally be able to get further in the bracket than others through luck. So some fights will get a bye, but then we can do our decision making from there, right? So let's cut it. No, let's not get it to 36. So I'm going to start by cutting Ivankov versus Magellan, because I think nobody gives a shit about that. So help me cut one more. What's the next one that we're cutting? Help me cut one more. Joey, read the damn rules. Rocks versus Harold is in there. Hadruden Makvis. Law versus Smoker. I think that's a great fight. Sabo versus Fujitora? No, I think that's an okay fight. I don't even like Sabo. I think that's kind of a cool one. Who wants to... Wait, why do people want to cut Law versus Smoker? Law versus Smoker is an amazing fight. I don't know if people are joking or not. That's like actually one of the coolest Devil Fruit fights in One Piece. That's one of the few fights where we actually get to see like versatile Devil Fruit abilities really at play. And the anime really did justice to Law versus Smoker. I think it's one of the best animated fights. Punk Hazard actually had some good animated fights. They were just Law fights. And Smoker fights. Punk Hazard had like 3 good animated fights, which was like... Or 2. Law versus Smoker. And then Law and Smoker versus Virgo. Kuzan versus Doflamingo. I'm not trying to add fights. Here, let me just cut Inuarashi versus Jack. Just to cut one. It really doesn't matter because all that matters is that we know it's not going far in the bracket, right? We don't have to pick the absolute worst one. Okay, so this is our roster. This is our roster. We're going to randomize the seeds. Fuck, I gotta find my fucking login to challenge brackets again. I just fucking forget this. Okay. So, hold on. Create a tournament. Oh my god. It didn't used to be... Fuck. Just want to do something simple. Hold on. Hold on. Give me a second, y'all. Okay. Oh, fuck. Okay, hold on. Hold on. Where did I used to do this? Your events. Man. New tournament. Yada yada. Single elimination. Okay. Oh my god. We're gonna get this. Don't worry. All right. Okay, I think I can do this. All right. Here. Okay, let's try and do this. All right, participants. Add participant. Add a single part. This is not how... Man, this used to be an easier way to do this shit. All right, bracket. Oh my god, it's trying to make everything really official. Okay, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna do a different site. Create tournament bracket online. Maybe it's just bracket HQ. Okay. Oh yeah, this is much easier. Look at this. This is I'm just looking for something like this. This is simple. I like this. Okay. All right, here we go. Garling versus Rocks. Shit, I guess I could put that. Sabo versus Elder slash Emu said Dreams. Did I already respond this? 10 Kisses not do a poll on which one it is. No, because it just isn't Garp. There's other characters involved. It's a team fight. It just doesn't even make sense. Is it Kid and Law versus... Is it Kid and Law versus Big Mom or Kid versus Big Mom? It's literally is a team fight. There's no way around that. Sabo versus Elder slash Emu. No, because there's no fight. Okay. Let's do our participants. Okay. Let's do our participants. So, we've got Ace, Blackbeard, Kizaru versus... Okay. Kizaru. Kizaru Supernova. Really, Kizaru. Is that really the next one? Wait, do we want to include Marco Kizaru? Include Marco versus Kizaru? Because Marco versus Kizaru is the only other... Like, Marineford's a lot of skirmishes. Marco versus Kizaru is the only one that's, like, kind of iconic. From what I recall, like, people really, really nutted over the Phoenix Fruit reveal and everything like that. Like, even though it's basically... It's almost nothing, right? Like, Kizaru doesn't attack, Marco blocks it. Then Kizaru does another attack, Marco flies through it. Then Marco kicks Kizaru. Kizaru blocks a little bit. Yeah, we're going to randomize it. I think more people are leaning no. It's tricky. I'll give it a mid. I'll just keep going in the meantime. Whitebeard, Kainu, Law Smoker, Law, Flamingo Fujitora, Sabo Burgess, Sabo Fujitora. Okay, looks like we are adding Marco Kizaru. Oh, Marco versus King and Queen. That's a much better fight. We'll put in both. Fuck, then are we putting in Marco versus Big Mom? And Perispero? Let's say Marco versus Big Mom is too short. That means we got to take 2 out. Or do you think maybe it'll let it work with 24, who knows? Or 26. Where are we at? Sabo Burgess, Sabo Fujitora. Okay. Kyrros Diamante. Sai, Lao G slash Baby 5. Ruden versus Mach V, Oden versus Kaido. Yeah, let's just put it in. Who cares? Scabbard's Kaido, Yamato Kaido. Killer Hawkins, Lawn Kid versus Big Mom. Loki, I like Killer versus Hawkins. Is there a way I can shorten that? That just looks too long. Say Shanks slash Scabbards. Green Bull. Is there a way to shorten that? Because Yamato's involved too. And Momonosuke. Yeah, let's do that. Shanks and Wano versus Green Bull. Shanks Kid. Law Blackbeard. Gabon Sommers, Rocks Herald. Rocks, does that also look tiny? We could do Rocks versus Roger and Garp. Just keep it simple. Okay. I think that's all good. Let's randomize, shuffle seats. Okay, we're all good. That should have 26, right? Yep, 26. Okay. All right. All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay. Now, how do I begin this shit? Go ahead, save. Oh, fuck. All right, hold on. Oh, I probably have to... How do I start this? Bracket information. Do I have to save bracket? Let me see this. Let me troubleshoot this. I'll be very upset if we... All right, let's see. Bracket name, One Piece Battles, One Piece. Save bracket. All right. Hold on, everybody. All right, give me 1 second here. Give me 1 second. I do have to troubleshoot a couple things, but we will be able to run this. Don't worry. Don't worry. Don't you worry. Okay. Ah, fuck. Hold on, hold on. There we go. There we go. Okay. We should be good. Should be good to run this. Here we go, everybody. All right. The time has begun. Just have to find my login info. It's manga, not anime. Let me add that in. Based on manga fight, not anime. 10K says, please, bro, I just want to see the consensus. Okay, we could do that, but there's no... Okay. Is it Garp versus Aokiji or Garp versus Blackbeard Pirates? Brim, thanks for being a Yonko tier member for 13 months. Love the Roger and Rocks contrast. Rocks died unsmiling and erased / unfree. Roger died smiling, free, immortalized, inspiring countless souls. Yeah, it's a pretty good contrast. I want to see Rocks' death scene, but it is a very, very sharp contrast. It's pretty beautiful. this isn't really like a thing about consensus or not, though, because it's like, is it Rocks versus Roger or Rocks versus Roger and Garp? Like, there's not really a. I think you have to be insanely biased to, or you're just trolling, I guess, if you vote it's Garp versus Aokiji. It doesn't really make any sense, right? Just like, you can't argue with reality, which is that Garp is fighting other characters and taking turns in between them and also Aokiji, right? Like, that's not really, there's nothing really to argue there, right? Okay, so let's get into it. It seems like Yamato and Kaido got a bye. So Kyrros Diamante or Smoker and Law versus Virgo? I think that's easy. That's an easy layup for Law and Smoker versus Virgo. It's a much more exciting fight. Keep in mind, here's the thing. We're not just we're like, criteria for who wins, emotion and stuff matters, stakes, etc. But at the end of the day, but also how cool it is, how cool a matchup is, the action, etc. Bottom line, what's the better fight based on story, hype, what we see, yada yada. I guess, what do you like better? For me, I'm not gonna lie, I think the Dressrosa fights, like, it's cool, but like Kyrros Diamante, like, if you want to be like, which one's a better storytelling fight, it's like, yeah, although Law and Smoker versus Virgo, Law does have like a backstory and stuff like that doesn't come out right there, but there's some history. And Smoker is fighting, you know, as like a representation of what the Marines should be against like a dirty cop, basically, yada yada. He's fighting for his Marines, G5, yada yada. There is some depth there. Obviously, Kyrros Diamante has a better story, but it's like, let's be honest. Who gives a shit about the Kyrros Diamante fight? I'm just going to move this shit along, right? Let's start the tournament. Right? Law Smoker, obviously better fight. Just go with what you feel like. Yeah, if Kobe wasn't there, Garp wouldn't have been stabbed. Yeah, if anything, it's like Garp's handicap was that his fucking subordinates were also there. And he had to take care of them. I don't think this needs a vote, right? We're all good. I just think Kyrros Diamante not that cool of a fight. I'm putting in Law Smoker versus Virgo. Ready? Submit scores. Is anybody gonna riot over that? I think that's pretty straightforward. I can do a vote just to see, but it's just like, does anybody actually feel that strongly about Kyrros Diamante? Which fight do you like better? We can do a vote, but this one I'm also gonna, I don't know. I don't even like Law, but to me it's pretty cut and dry that. Oh, god damn it. Okay, I'm really gonna be very, very reserved with the votes that I do just now, because I feel like I got pushed into doing a vote that I had a feeling would be very lopsided in the first place, and what do you know? It was really lopsided. Kingling, Demi-Human says more, it's impossible for the anime not to weigh in subconsciously. I like this fight better in the manga in the first place. Like, keep in mind, I very rarely go back to watch fights in the anime. I did watch Smoker versus Virgo and stuff in the anime, but I already thought that that's a really fucking cool fight. Law and Smoker. I thought Law versus Smoker was a phenomenal fight when it happened in the manga, in Bunk Hazard. Like, that was what I'd always hoped Oda would do with these sort of... I thought that was a great debut fight for the New World. Like, kind of showing, like, actually high-level ability users doing an extended battle with one another. I thought that was phenomenal. And Law and Smoker versus Virgo. Smoker versus Virgo was very well choreographed in the manga too. And then Law versus Virgo ends in like that iconic moment of like Law cutting the whole mountain in half. It's not really close, you know? Scabbards versus Kaido or Law versus Smoker. Interesting. I think Law versus Smoker is easily better as a fight and how cool it is. Scabbards versus Kaido has a storytelling. I think this one is closer, probably. I also really think, you know what? I really think you should just go by like which fight do you like better at the end of the day. I think that's the only criteria that really matters. Because, like, for me, from my perspective, right, I get that on paper, the Scabbards versus Kaido has a lot more storytelling behind it, but I also literally don't give a shit when the Scabbards are fighting Kaido. I literally do not give a shit. Versus Law versus Smoker, I think is cool as fuck. So if you guys keep it close, I'm just going to vote for Law versus Smoker, and I'll be the deciding vote. All right, we'll give it 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Close that. And wait, it doesn't even tell me which one won. Just 50. Oh, I guess this is a 50-50 split. 50-50 split. I'm just going to do it for Law and Smoker then. Rayleigh Kizaru or Killer Hawkins? I like that Hudruden and Makvi's Hudruden got a bye. Alright, Rayleigh versus Kizaru. Good shit. I actually like Killer Hawkins as far as... Killer versus Hawkins is low-key one of my favorite Onigashima fights. Low-key, I prefer Killer Hawkins more than Lawn Kid versus Big Mom. I have a lot of problems with the Lawn Kid versus Big Mom fight. I also think it's genuinely bizarre that I've got a lot of thoughts about Law Kid versus Big Mom. I don't think that's a good fight at all for taking down a Yonko. For taking down a Yonko, I think it's a genuinely terrible fight. But Killer Hawkins is like the reverse in that it's like a fight with the most low-level shit imaginable, but it actually gets some good storytelling out there. And I think it's a case where Oda is actually a little bit clever with like the reason that Killer's able to take down Hawkins. I think Oda takes advantage of... I think it's a clever little spin on the voodoo ability or whatever that like Killer's able to take advantage, exploit, the fact that Kid is missing an arm and everything. So actually that's one of my preferred fights from Onigashima. Sabo Burgess or Gabon Sommers. Ooh, interesting. This one's interesting. Both of them are basically characters getting pieced up. I prefer Gabon versus Sommers, maybe just because I like the action of it a little bit better. And I think I was more excited personally to see what Gabon could do. But obviously... Oh, we could have put in Rayleigh Sommers, but... Sabo Burgess, obviously. that has some really cool shit too. And Sabo Burgess combined the Coliseum fight with his fire stuff later on. Gabon Somers ain't even a fight, just a negative. Yeah, Gabon does really punk him. Surprised more Sabo fans aren't pulling for Sabo here. I think Sabo fans don't even care about the Burgess fight. Sabo fans would rather pretend that Sabo took on Emu and all 5 Gores at the same time. Okay, we're going to give it to Gabon Somers. I mean, that's my preferred fight as well. But I wonder if that also might be recency bias for her to pull the fights up side by side. I think I was just more excited to see Gabon Somers because it's like first time seeing a God's Knight and then first time getting to see like somebody do damage to the God's Knights and like counter the regeneration stuff. So that was interesting in and of itself. And Gabon, it's just like old legend. You want to see how he fights and stuff a little bit. Oh, the recent fight. All right, here we go. I feel like this is not even worth a poll, right? This is I don't think this is even worth putting down. Yeah, this is like just straight up. How'd you guys feel? Let me do a little poll for that too. How'd you guys feel about the fight? Here, I don't even know why I did a poll for this. Here. How did you feel about Dami Reversi Rocks versus Roger and Garp? Oh, I can only do 4 options. Man, I feel like I need to do 5 options for this one. Yeah, I'll just do 4. I feel like disappointing is fine to have as instead, because I wanted to do like good, then okay, and then bad. But I feel like if it was just okay, then it's disappointing. So I think that's fair. It combines the 2 ideas. Okay, so most people have it as very good, like somewhere in the good to amazing range, basically. I would agree. I think very good is where I would put it. I'd put it good to... I'd put it... I think it was very good compared to what most of these other fights that Oda's got here basically are. I'm going to ask another question. Let me rephrase this. Kind of curious. Hold on. Let me rephrase this. About met my expectations. Okay, surpassed my expectations, met my expectations, slightly below what I hoped for, nowhere near as good as I... Okay. Let's do that. Let's do it more so based on... Because this fight had a lot of anticipation, right? So I'm curious, did it live up to your hopes? Because in a vacuum, I think it's like... If we just got this fight out of the blue, then in a vacuum I'd be like, it's amazing. But because it's a fight that we had so many expectations for, then that's a little bit more complicated. Yeah, so a lot of people are voting that it's not quite as good as what we hoped for. I think that this makes a lot of sense. So I think it wasn't a fight that surpassed my expectations, but it just about met what I'd kind of hoped for. Maybe slightly less, but it's still really, really good. Does that make sense? Like, in a vacuum, if we were just, like, getting all these fights out of the blue, then that would be one of the best fights in One Piece. But because it had been built up so much in the story, then, like, the bar is really, really high. So it's complicated. In that, in and of itself, it's, in my opinion, like, a really good, if not amazing fight. But based on it being built up to be this transcendent fight, for me, it probably, like... It was still really good. That's the thing. It's really, really good. I think it met my expectations in many ways. I think it's just complicated. I would probably vote either met my expectations or slightly below what I'd hoped for, but I think it's because I hoped for something that was mind-blowing, and it wasn't mind-blowing. It was just really good. But you could also argue that maybe you hope for too much, but I would also argue that the story itself built it up a lot, you know? So it's complicated. Continuing on. Sai and Lao G / Baby 5 or Oden versus Kaido. I think this is tricky because, like, well, I don't know. I mean, I would actually just pick Oden versus Kaido, even though it's like a nothing fight. It's just like... I didn't think Sai versus Lao G is even bad. It's just, like, I don't really... I think it's actually kind of good. It's just, like, such a nothing fight compared to, like, Oden versus Kaido in terms of significance. Okay, Marco Kizaru or Kizaru versus... Ooh, this is a good one. This is a good one. Here we go. I would actually go Marco versus Kizaru here. Because I still just remember the memory of Marco versus Kizaru is still really, really sharp in my mind as one of the coolest ways to start the war. And I'm pretty sure I watched it, because like back then, chapters, they would come out in weird formats. It's hard to explain. Like, you're just trying to get the chapter as soon as possible. I'm pretty sure, from what I remember, I watched this chapter initially on a YouTube video. And it was just Marco's ability that we'd never seen before. And it was blue flames. I remember all the comments were like, why does he have blue flames and stuff? That hadn't been explained yet. So people thought it was like a blue flame fruit instead of Ace's fire. People got... Yeah, I think that's fine. People got Kizaru versus Supernovas. Also a great fight. I just remember Marco versus Kizaru, like, the timing of it. Because just the Marineford War had so much hype going into it. And that was kind of the first really cool interaction of the war. Revealed also the mythical Zoans and everything. I feel like that was like a... It's... Oh, whoops. We'll do this. But I do think it's like a very, very... it's also one of my favorite things to go back and see people's reactions to, like, anime, like, reactors and stuff. I think it's just a very short fight, so you could argue that Kizaru Supernova is better. All right. Marco versus King and Queen. Okay. Shanks, Scabbards, I actually like Marco versus King and Queen. I think it's a good fight. I think it really shows what Marco can do. And it's like got some creative uses of his Phoenix Fruit, like he shoots like a feather and stuff like that. I think it's one of Oda's better choreographed fights. Lawn Kid versus Big Mom or Ace versus Blackbeard? To me, this is an easy call. Very easy call. But I can imagine why it might not be for other people. I just will forever view Lawn Kid versus Big Mom as like a pure bullshit fight. All right, good stuff. We're going to move my preferred fight along. Garp versus the Blackbeard Pirates or Rocks versus Herald? I think Rocks versus Herald is a cool fight, but obviously it is nowhere close to the Hachinosu battle. I think that's one of One Piece's best fights that aren't Straw Hat related. All right, Yamato Kaido or Lawn Smoker versus Virgo? I think from here on, we probably only have good fights. Except for the Hajru. No, because some things got buys that didn't deserve buys. Alright, I'll give this 10 seconds. I feel like my viewers are probably pretty biased. I feel like in some other chats, Yamato versus Kaido would win. But I do think Lawn Smoker versus Virgo is a great fight. Ends in a very iconic moment. One of One Piece's more iconic moments. This fight, I think, obviously the choreography between Law versus Smoker is a lot better. But Rayleigh versus Kizaru is just, like, so exciting when it first happens. Even if we don't see that much of it, it's just really, really exciting. Meek, thanks for the 5. Slight twist, worst fight in One Piece? I don't know, Raizo versus Fukurokuju? If we want to go with fight that, like... I think Raizo versus Fukurokuju is actually easily the worst fight in One Piece. Because it takes so long for such minor characters that we don't care about. It's literally still going... Like, it's genuinely actually still taking up screen time in the middle of Luffy versus Kaido's finale. That's how long it's going. Like, it's actually still taking up screen time. We're having to cut away from the most important fight in Wano for the one that people give the least shit about. This is tight, but it looks like Law versus Smoker's taking it. That's fair. I mean, things are getting really, really competitive here. After this, I'll give my quick rankings of my favorites. Do I need to even give the... I'm not even going to do a poll for this. This is stupid. Guban Sommers. Rocks and Roger versus Gar... Oh. I'm pretty sure I know which way people will go, but I think this is worth at least doing a poll. Sanji versus Absalom is pretty ass as well. No, I think it's just like a fun fight for Sanji. Like, if you're Sanji, he just kind of tears him apart. For the Straw Hats in that arc, like, the main thing, they all got that big fight against Oars. So everybody got to shine against Oars. So, like, it's okay that they had some... I mean, Usopp had a great fight. Zoro actually had a good fight. It was just pretty fast. Um, Robin and Chopper had a bad fight. Frankie didn't really get anything. Oh, it's actually tight. I guess a lot of people like the... It's not tight. It's still like 2/3 people prefer Rocks fight. But thought it'd be more overwhelming. Okay, Shanks versus Kid or Oden versus Kaido? For me, this is actually a nice, easy, fun matchup because they're both very similar. They're really both just one attack. I just really prefer the Shanks versus Kid fight because I come away from the Shanks versus Kid fight feeling like, holy shit, that was really cool that Shanks just, one, saw that with Future Sight and then just destroyed Kid. Oden versus Kaido, I came away from it feeling like, I wish we actually got to see more of Oden versus Kaido. Pretty simple. The Shanks Kid. Kunal Dashawal, thanks a lot. Hi, Morge. Quit my 2-year job to take a break before next year. Thought I was doing fine till I found out the girl I had a thing with moved on. Then when it hit me, I wasn't over. Then when it hit me, I wasn't over her. Hit rock bottom again. Oh, I'm sorry, man. That's rough. You got to go through like a bit of a rebuild phase. I'd say that's for the best. Quitting your job to take a break before next year. If that's what you feel like, look, at the end of the day, I feel like whatever gives you more peace and allows you to go into rebuild mode or whatever in terms of like, you know, how you feel about life, your priorities, things like that. Just do a big reset. I encourage that. Man. Old Faithful, thanks for being a yawn. I promise it'll all feel better. Just give it some time. Old Faithful, thanks for being a Yonko tier member for 30 months, man. Morch, how are you doing, bro? Are you excited for the end of the flashback and return to Elbaf? So I think we still got some chapters to go. I think we'll be back in Elbaf maybe chapter 1170. So I'm excited to see how the Herald situation plays out. I'm excited to see some of Loki growing up and his adventures at sea. And I am excited to get back to Elbaf because then we get to fight Emu. So yeah, but I want more out of this flashback still, right? So Rox's send-off, the Herald stuff, Loki growing up. Maybe we'll get to see Loki versus Shanks. Who knows? All right, Kizaru versus the Supernova. Let's see. Kizaru Supernova. Oh, this is a good question. This is a good matchup. This is a very good matchup. I'm not even a Law fan, but I actually lean Law versus Doflamingo and Fujitora. I thought that was like a really cool... Kizaru versus the Supernova is kind of a stomp, but it's a cool stomp because you get to kind of see glimpses of what all the Supernova can do, and then also see that Kizaru is just above all of it. Law versus Doflamingo and Fujitora, that's just a cool... Like, I liked seeing all of their abilities interact at first. Then it came down to Law versus Doflamingo on the bridge, which I thought was a good fight. Yeah. I think this is a really tight one for me. Kizaru was aura farming. I don't think it's an easy call either way. I know my preference, but I totally understand if other people have not that preference. I'll give it 5 more seconds. That 3-way fight was so cool. Yeah, I thought it was a 3-way fight that was really cool that then transitioned into a really solid, like, several-page battle between Just Law and Doflamingo on the bridge. But we will give it to Kizaru versus the Supernova is what it looks like. Okay. Oh, I don't think there's any point in even doing the poll for this. We're just going to do Ace versus Blackbeard. Ah, interesting. This is a tough one. I also like this because these fights basically parallel one another. Whitebeard basically, like, this is kind of like the last hurrah of both of these old legends. Yeah, they're both nowhere near their primes. They're both very handicapped at this point in time. Whitebeard goes to Marineford to take back Ace. Garp goes to... They both go to save their proteges, right? Garp raids Hachinosu to save Kobe. They're both terribly outmatched. Whitebeard ultimately... yeah, it's just... Obviously, Whitebeard Akainu is a lot shorter, but I think it's a more iconic scene. But Garp versus Blackbeard parts, the Hachinosu raid is a much more elaborate battle that gives you a lot more. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, Akainu and Aokiji basically being both the centerpieces of each. That's a good way to parallel it as well. All right, looks like Garp versus the Blackbeard parts take it. I think either answer is a good answer. For me, I think Whitebeard, the moment of Whitebeard, like just the rage and the emotion of Whitebeard versus Akainu, but Garp versus the Blackbeard parts also has really good um, emotion. I prefer the emotion of this, and also for me, it will forever be etched in my memory the moment of like Whitebeard just going off and just hitting Akainu with that final attack. But I still love the entire raid on Hachinosu, of course. Okay, Law Smoker versus Virgo, or just Law versus Smoker? Good matchup. Law and Smoker versus Virgo. Law versus Smoker. Smoker was just... I feel so bad for Smoker that arc. He was really just passed around. They just passed him around. Because first he lost to Law. Then he lost to Virgo. And then for good measure, Doflamingo fucked him up off screen at the end too. Like, or no, it wasn't off screen. It was pretty fast. It was just a fast fight. He just ran the gauntlet of like Law, and then he gets better, and then he fights Virgo, and then he gets some recovery time, and then he fights Doflamingo. It was just he just got hype tooled. Lawn Smoker versus Virgo. Yeah, fair. I think both fights are good. I think I lean that way too. I think I lean the Law and Smoker versus Virgo just because the ending is so cool. And I don't even like Law. I acknowledge the ending is cool. I don't think there's any point in this, right? We kind of all know. If there's major dissent, I doubt it. No disrespect to Gaban Sommers. It's just... Come on now. Shanks Kid or Kizar versus the Supernova. Hoda treats Smoker like Toei treats Sanji, lol. I heard that I didn't even watch the clip, but I saw some people complaining about Twitter about how Toei, like, wrote in another filler scene for, like, Sanji getting fucked up by Venus Juro. Oh, this is a tight one. I was actually very curious. Because I think I've been underestimating so far in this bracket how much people really liked Kizaru versus the Supernova. I liked it too, but, like, for me, it was more of a build-up, like, it was a cool warm-up, and then the scene that, like, I thought Kizaru versus Rayleigh was really cool. Even though we didn't get that much out of it, just seeing Kizaru pull out like a light sword and then start like going sword fighting and stuff with Rayleigh, I thought that shit was cool. All right, Kizaru versus the Supernova. Yeah, I think that's been probably, I guess from my perspective, that's the dark horse for this tournament so far because it's really gone. It's won several matchups that I all thought are like hard matchup toss-ups, personally. Like, I don't feel like, I definitely understand how it beats all of those, and for me, they're all like 50-50 toss-ups, each one of these, but it's just impressive that I think it's had the hardest gauntlet so far. And it's just kind of unexpected for me. Okay, this is a good one. I mean, it makes sense. We're at the tippy top of the food chain now. This is really good shit. I don't know which way people would vote this. The only impact frame Sanji got was him getting hit by Venus. I do actually think that somebody at Toei doesn't like Sanji. Somebody higher up. This is a tight one. I don't think you can go wrong with this one. All right, I'll give it 5 seconds, but it looks like the winner is becoming apparent. All right. We're going to give it a Garp versus the Blackbeard Pirates. My only thing with the Ace versus Blackbeard, very long fight, very cool reveals of abilities and stuff. My gripe with the Ace versus the Blackbeard fight, even though I like it a lot, is I don't think the action flows well. And it's weird because we actually get to see a good number of their abilities. Like Ace uses, obviously his Fire Fist. He uses like a Fire Pillar ability to stop Burgess's attack. He uses Fire Guns or whatever. He uses the Firefly ability. He uses a Fire Cross ability. He uses Fire Lances, and obviously his Giant Sun attack. Like, we see a shit ton of attacks from Ace. Blackbeard, we obviously his like Black Hole, his Vortex, stuff like that, right? We actually do get to see a lot of abilities. I find the fight somewhat stiff, if that makes sense. Like, I just don't think that the action flows that well. And it's weird because it feels like Oda even doesn't even want to show some of the interactions. So it's kind of hard to explain. It just doesn't feel like a fluid fight. It feels a little bit almost like a Pokemon battle where we also don't get to see some parts of it. So I can understand why that's not among people. Like, if you compare to like Law versus Smoker, you get to actually see a lot of choreography and everything. It's the strangest thing. Like, Firefly, like, you see a lot of action from Ace, like a lot of techniques shown, especially from Ace during that fight, but it also weirdly feels like you don't actually get that many interactions. It feels like a stiff fight. I still think, for me, it's one of my favorites. At the end of this, I'm just going to pick out what my favorites are, but, yeah, it's cool. Yeah, but Galaxy Impact and the Galaxy Divide, yeah, just the moves that Garp kind of put on display were, like, Galaxy Impact was just mind-blowing when he first did it. I remember people freaking out when that chapter dropped with that panel because it was just like people didn't even know that you could do that with Haki. Like, that kind of, like, before that, our biggest Haki attack that we'd seen was like Divine Departure, you know, like in terms of just like distant point of distance between the attack and like how much the Haki is spread out or whatever. I think it was just Divine Departure, you know, and then it was like, oh shit. Because the thing that we've been taught is, like, the distance between your fist versus, like, the point of contact, that kind of shows, not, like, the amount of Haki, but, like, that was, like, a good indicator of, like, crazy Haki's being used, you know? And then Galaxy Impact happened, and everyone was like, what the fuck even is this? All right, continuing on. I mean, to me, this is pretty simple. Yeah. Did the poll just for show, but yeah, pretty simple. All right, here we go. Also, let's get the stream likes up to 150 real quick because we're almost there. Anime Dimension, thanks for the 2. Hey, Morge, when is deadline for Pirate King podcast? Just get it in now, man. Just get it in now. I'm probably going to record it tomorrow at the latest Wednesday, but I would recommend just getting it in now. For those of you who don't know, he's referring to the Pirate King podcast, which is, of course, my podcast for top tier of members and patrons. You can go in, if you're a Pirate King member, submit any question you want about One Piece, other anime, manga, movies, TV, video games, etc., and I'll answer every single person's question in far greater depth than I have time to on stream. And then it's all compiled into an hour and a half-ish long podcast that then comes out. You get to listen to all of it, and you get access to all previous podcasts. So just, if you're a Pirate King member or thinking about becoming a Pirate King member, then definitely get your submissions in right now. All right. Garp versus the Blackbeard Pirates. Yeah, I expected that to... I was just curious because I'd been consistently underestimating how strongly people felt about Kizaru versus the Supernova. So I was like, oh, could this maybe topple it? Okay, I think this is fitting because I do think that this makes sense as the final matchup. Okay. There's no Strahd fights. We're actually doing this without any Strahd fights. No Strahd fights. Oh, really? Interesting. Interesting. I actually prefer Roger and Garp versus Rocks. I just prefer the action from it. But I might also be recency biased. Because, like, the entire Hachinosu raid is really, really great. Like, it's really great. Let me ask you guys this. What if we extended it? Because really what it is like... No, I think that's correct. Had barely any action? I think it has more action than, like, a lot of these fights. I think it's got a good amount of action. Like, if you were to compare to, like, people like to say it's just Garp versus Aokiji, this, like, Roger and Garp versus Rocks definitely has a lot more action than Garp versus Aokiji. Because Garp versus Aokiji is actually just, like, 3 interactions. That's it. And one of them is just Garp running past Aokiji, even, right? So, like, it's very short compared to that. If you want to look at Garp's whole battle at Hachinosu, that's when it's more extensive. It does look like Garp versus the Blackbeard Pirates takes the win. I mean, I think that's a phenomenal fight. If I were to quickly rate my favorites, I think this one actually... Hold on. Let me see. If I were to rate my favorites... So we got a winner right there. Mark is complete. So this is... I think that's correct. If I were to pick my favorites, I think I would pick... Rocks and Roger... I think this would be in there. Rocks versus Roger and Garp. Garp versus the Blackbeard Pirates would be in there. I think Kizaru versus the Supernova does not really crack my top 5. I think Ace versus Blackbeard is in there for me. Really, Kizaru is actually one of my favorites. Even though it's not much of a fight, it's just... part of it is how much did it affect me at the time. Like, how cool did I think it was at the time. Law versus Doflamingo and Fujitora might be in there. I think Whitebeard Akainu might round out my top 5. So I think it'd be something like Whitebeard Akainu. Is there something I'm missing here? Yeah, Whitebeard Akainu's in there. Rayleigh Kizaru's in there for me. Law versus Smoker might even be in there for me. It's hard to say. Shanks versus Kid is one of my favorites. And then towards the tippy top, you got, like, Ace, Blackbeard, Rocks versus Roger and Garp, and then Garp versus the Blackbeard Pirates. I might even have Rocks versus Roger and Garp at my number 1. The Hachinosu raid's a much more extensive sequence. Rocks versus Roger and Garp just feels like a really non-stop but fast and short sequence of, like, just crazy strong Haki and attacks. I don't know. Meek, thanks for the 5. Only bad part of Garp versus the Blackbeard Pirates is that Garp lost, in my opinion. Nah, he needed to lose. Top 3 is Garp, Rocks, and Ace stuff. Yeah, I would agree. I think I'd have Whitebeard Akainu in there at number 4. I think I'd have Whitebeard Akainu in there. And then after that, there's, like, a lot of different fights that you could toss it. I think I'd have Rayleigh Kizaru at 5. And you don't even get much out of Rayleigh Kizaru. I just thought it was really cool at the time. This is non-straw hats. So Luffy versus Luchi. If we were including everything, then for me personally, Luffy versus Luchi is number one in One Piece. And its conclusion, especially in the anime, its conclusion is to date my favorite moment in One Piece. Let's say, out of if we're including anime moments, Luffy versus Luchi's conclusion is my favorite moment. Not just in One Piece, but in anime in general. That final Jet Gatling, to me, that's like the peak of just pure shonen emotion. It's actually just so... The final Jet Gatling, Luffy's final yell, it being announced that Luffy won, Luffy yelling that we're all going home together, Robin, and then the Panda Robin. It's so good, it's fucking insane. It makes me sad, because, like, I don't think I'm going to read a story like that again that has a moment like that. I don't think One Piece is going to have it, because Oda even said, he's like, after I finished Enies Lobby, I thought I'd never be able to write such a touching story again. And I don't think he has. He's obviously done some great stuff since then, but yeah, for me that's just a special concoction of emotions. Just really love that. Favorite Luffy fight post-time skip? Asks Korn. Probably Luffy versus Kaido still. Like, Luffy versus Kaido for me, I still like the fight a lot. I like the Gear 5th stuff. I would say I would rank Luffy versus Kaido, then Luffy versus Katakuri. I think initially I probably had Luffy versus Katakuri higher than Luffy versus Kaido, but given time, I think I got Luffy versus Kaido, then Luffy versus Katakuri, then Luffy versus Doflamingo, then Luffy versus... Actually, then I got Luffy versus Cracker, and then Luffy versus Kizaru. I actually like Luffy versus Cracker. I just like the reveal that Cracker, the body was just one soldier, and that Cracker's actually got like a ton of those soldiers, and that Cracker, what do you call? Cracker's own body has even stronger, like his main body has like even stronger armament Haki than Luffy. I don't know. I think part of it is expectations, right? So like Luffy versus Kizaru was like a fun, satisfying little fight. It felt short-lived for me. I would have loved to have seen more of it. And then Luffy versus Cracker for me was like a pleasant surprise the direction that went. Yamato versus Kaido was the most emotional fight of all of One Piece. Yeah, the problem was the lack of tension and how Gear 5 felt like a non-test for Luffy. I could say a lot about... I still think Luffy versus Kaido and Gear 5 are like some of the strongest points of Wano, even if like there's so many areas where like Luffy versus Kaido could have been a lot better if Oda just stopped having Luffy like just being ha ha he he I'm having fun like it the whole time. Instead writing it like, you know, one of the fights where he actually gives a shit from start to finish. I don't know. Like Luffy versus Luchi. Like Luffy versus Crocodile. I don't know. All right, everybody. Good shit. We determined the best fight. I had a really fun time. Yeah, and it looks like Rocks versus Roger and Garp, despite, you know, a lot of people's, like, varying spectrum of feelings about it. From the polls that we ran, it seemed like people at least really liked the fight. The question was, like, did it reach the expectations? Well, expectations were sky high, so, like, that's more of a nuanced question, but everybody, at least in a vacuum, seems to really love this fight. I love it a lot. And yeah, it came in at a respectable second place, which I think is really good, especially considering it's a flashback fight, so, you know. All right, everybody. Hope you guys enjoyed this. And yeah, with that, I will talk to you all.